They said humans were fragile, unpredictable, and easily forgotten among the stars. But I was about to prove them spectacularly wrong. One stumble, one laugh, and one small act of courage at a time. Kale stepped onto the translucent floor of the palace chamber and immediately regretted it. His boots made a hollow plink with each step, echoing across the vast hall like a human-sized percussion instrument. The ceiling above shimmered with bioluminescent veins that pulsed slowly, like the palace itself had a heartbeat, and Kale found himself distracted, staring upward until he almost collided with a hovering attendant who looked like a jellyfish in formal attire. "Ah, greetings, human," the attendant said, its voice bubbling like carbonated water. "Careful where you oh, too late." A soft asterisk splat accompanied the words as Kale stumbled into a puddle of some luminescent liquid, sending droplets flying in a chaotic arc across the floor. The attendant blinked 3 times, a clear signal of disapproval, or maybe confusion. Kale couldn't tell with jelly forms. "I assure you," Kale said, scraping glowing liquid off his boots, "I usually make a much better first impression on Earth at least." The human humor did not seem to translate. The attendant's gelatinous body quivered, and it floated away with what Kale assumed was polite restraint. He exhaled slowly and scanned the room. The chamber was vast, shaped like a crescent moon, the walls lined with crystals that reflected the bioluminescent ceiling into fractal patterns. He could see shadows flitting through the edges, other court members presumably, but none of them had yet approached. He straightened his back, attempted to look regal, and promptly caught his foot on a low, iridescent step, nearly sending himself tumbling forward. "Really," he muttered to no one in particular, "how hard can walking on alien floors be?" And then she appeared, Elithara, the alien queen. Kale had only met her once before, and even then it was under chaotic circumstances that involved a gravity lift, a screaming servant, and a very angry delegation of bioluminescent diplomats. She stepped into view, and Kale found himself caught somewhere between awe and abject terror. She looked almost human, perfectly human, except for the way her long, elegant ears curved up and back from her skull, like twin crescent moons. Her skin glowed faintly under the crystal lights, an ethereal ivory with a shimmer that suggested it might actually be soft enough to glow from mood alone. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, but with a glimmer of amusement that made Kale wonder if she were smiling behind the composure of royalty. She stopped just a few meters from him and inclined her head slightly, the long ears twitching subtly. "Human," she said, her voice a soft, melodic whisper that seemed to vibrate in the very air. "Do you remember what you once did for me?" Kale blinked, his mind raced. What did I do? He remembered a lot of foolish things, some heroics, some just accidental survival. He said, trying to summon whatever dignity a human possessed. "I didn't accidentally break anything that one time." Elithara's lips curved in a hint of a smile. "Something like that," she said, and the corners of her mouth lifted just enough to soften the aura of absolute authority she carried. Kale's relief was almost immediate, though he quickly replaced it with new panic. He couldn't let himself look too relaxed, could he? He straightened again, held out a hand, and promptly tripped on another section of the translucent floor. A sharp asterisk plink followed by a small asterisk crack sounded as one of the crystal veins beneath him fractured ever so slightly. He froze, heart thudding, waiting for a death sentence or at least a dramatic glare. Elithara's ears twitched once, a soft motion that seemed entirely deliberate, and then she chuckled. It was a sound like wind over glass, light and musical, and Kale nearly fell over again, this time in disbelief. "Perhaps," she said, still smiling, "you are more memorable than I anticipated." Kale bowed awkwardly, scraping his boots along the floor in a graceless arc. "I can assure you, your Majesty," he stammered, "that memorable is generally not my goal." He paused, hoping that somehow, somewhere, this might pass for charm. "You are human," she said softly, her glowing eyes studying him carefully. which means your concept of charm is uniquely unpredictable. The words were not entirely a reprimand, but they carried the weight of a court accustomed to precision. Cale felt his stomach clench. Unpredictable in human terms often translated to catastrophic in alien court terms. But then Elithara's laugh came again, and with it, Cale's tension seemed to evaporate into the luminescent air. He realized with no small amount of relief that her amusement was genuine. Around them, the court remained watchful, though their expressions were impossible to read. Some floated slightly above the floor, some shimmered like moving water. Cale wondered if they could hear his inner thoughts. They all seemed attuned to subtleties he couldn't even begin to comprehend. He reminded himself to breathe and then tripped again on an errant crystal vein. The court gasped, and he raised his hands in surrender. "See," he said, "I am doing this intentionally to test the gravity tolerances of your floors." The Queen's smile widened. Indeed, a brave approach. Cale shook his head and muttered, or idiotic, I forget which. He glanced around at the alien diplomats, and one of them, a floating orb with delicate filaments, quivered in what Cale assumed was laughter or perhaps judgment. "Yes," he said loudly, "definitely testing, purely scientific." Elithara tilted her head, and Cale could swear her ears twitched like twin antennae, tracking his every movement. He felt like a child attempting a magic trick for a jury of highly evolved scientists. But beneath her amusement, there was warmth, an acknowledgement that this awkward human had, in some way, mattered once and still did. Cale tried to imagine what that could have been, but his memory drew a blank. He was certain it wasn't anything heroic, just a quick reflex, a slip into courage without thinking. And yet here he was in the center of an alien court, remembered for it. "Come," Elithara said, gesturing with her hand in a fluid motion that seemed to command both attention and calm. "Let us walk." Cale followed, stepping carefully this time but inevitably bumping a low crystal podium. He muttered a half-apology, half-excuse about the hazards of human feet. Elithara laughed softly, a sound that made the crystalline hall resonate. "You have not changed," she said. "Unpredictable, clumsy, and entirely human. And yet," her gaze softened, "there is courage there too. Do you understand why I remember you?" Cale swallowed hard, hoping his next words wouldn't betray his own nervous excitement. I think so," he said. "I hope it's the courage, not the clumsiness." Her ears twitched once more. "Both," she said, and the soft glow of her skin deepened, as if her body itself approved of the human humor. "Both are important." As they walked through the palace, Cale noticed the subtle hums and pulses that ran through the walls, an energy field that seemed to respond to their movements. Holographic projections flickered above pools of liquid crystal, showing alien constellations, mapping far-off systems, and documenting historical events he couldn't hope to decipher. And yet the Queen walked beside him, acknowledging his presence not as a tool or curiosity, but as someone whose small human actions had left a mark. Cale looked down at his own hands, half expecting them to glow with some residual heroism. Nothing happened, he sighed. "Well, I guess saving lives and breaking decorum is still the human way," he muttered. Elithara's laugh followed him like a gentle melody, and for a moment the palace seemed less like an alien fortress and more like a place where even humans could belong, awkwardly, unpredictably, and with just enough courage to matter. When they reached a landing overlooking a lake of liquid light, Elithara stopped. The glow from the water reflected in her eyes, and Cale couldn't tell if it was the reflection or the quiet approval that made them sparkle. "Human," she whispered, leaning slightly closer, "do not underestimate the weight of small actions. One slip, one gesture, one laugh, it can echo across worlds." Cale opened his mouth, ready to make a joke about slipping again and starting a galactic incident, but thought better of it. Instead, he grinned nervously and said, "I'll try to remember that." The Queen's ears flicked, and she allowed herself a private smile. In that moment, Cale felt the improbable warmth of recognition, the kind that made a human feel like more than a visitor, more than a curiosity, like someone whose choices, however clumsy, could truly matter. And somewhere in the shimmering palace, Kale thought he might even have made Elithara laugh again. Kale blinked as the soft glow of the liquid lake spread beneath them, the light reflecting in prismatic streaks across Elithara's glowing skin. She moved with a fluid grace that made every step seem deliberate, like water flowing over polished stones. And Kale realized he had absolutely no idea how he was supposed to match her pace. His own feet clomped awkwardly against the translucent platform, producing a series of hollow echoes that made a passing diplomat pause mid-hover to glance at him. Kale waved in apology, accidentally flinging a stray droplet of glowing liquid toward a hovering orb that quivered in what could only be described as alarm. "Sorry," Kale said, hoping his tone suggested both humility and charm. The orb blinked rapidly, which Kale took as a polite acknowledgement, though he was still unsure whether it was annoyance or appreciation. Elithara didn't react to the minor chaos, her ears twitching slightly as she observed him with that same sharp amusement that had accompanied him from the first awkward encounter. "You are still uniquely human," she said, her words flowing smoothly like music, yet carrying the subtle weight of authority. Kale smiled nervously. "Uniquely disastrous, more like," he said, attempting humor. "I like to keep things interesting, adds suspense." Elithara's lips curved, and Kale thought he might have actually earned a laugh, a real one, not just a polite, courtly sound. Their walk took them past a series of chambers where alien scholars pored over holographic projections that displayed shifting star maps and equations of physics that Kale could not hope to parse. One projection flickered and expanded, creating a temporary wall of light that resembled a swirling galaxy in miniature. Kale reached out impulsively, touching it with the tip of his finger. A spark of energy licked his skin, and he yelped. Elithara's eyes twinkled faintly, and she flicked one glowing finger at the projection, dissipating it instantly. "Curiosity is good," she said softly, "but caution is recommended." Kale nodded solemnly, then muttered under his breath, "Curiosity. I just wanted to see if it tasted like cotton candy." She didn't respond, but her ears twitched in what Kale decided was amusement. He realized that she could read him like a book, even when he tried to mask his thoughts with jokes. The alien court valued composure, intelligence, and precision, and yet here he was, a human whose awkwardness and impulsive humor somehow intrigued the queen. It was both terrifying and oddly comforting. Elithara led him into a chamber filled with floating platforms, each glowing faintly and pulsing in time with the palace's subtle hum. "You will assist me here," she said, gesturing to the platforms. "We are rearranging certain protocols." Kale looked at the platforms and instinctively took a cautious step backward, only to discover that the floor beneath him had slightly shifted, tilting. He caught himself with a panicked lunge, grabbing onto nothing in particular. "Right," he said, steadying himself. "Rearranging protocols, got it. Absolutely standard human task." One platform hovered near him, glowing a soft blue. Elithara raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps begin there." Kale approached it slowly, noticing that it seemed to respond to thought or at least to proximity. He extended his hand, muttering to himself, "Okay, Kale, this is fine. Just push the floating thing. How hard can it be?" The platform shot upward, spinning slightly before colliding with a crystal column. Kale's eyes widened. "Oops," he said, as a faint chime sounded from somewhere in the palace, likely signaling a minor offense. Elithara's ears flicked, and she pinched the bridge of her nose with one long, elegant finger. Then, much to Kale's surprise, she laughed, a quiet, musical sound that seemed to ripple through the room. "Unpredictable," she said, shaking her head, "yet somehow effective." Kale straightened, brushing off imaginary dust from his tunic. "I call it creative problem-solving," he said. "Some might call it chaos. But really, it's just human ingenuity." Elithara's eyes softened, and for a moment the alien court faded into the background. Kale realized that she genuinely enjoyed his presence, that the humor he used to mask his nerves was now a bridge between worlds. Their tasks grew more complex as the day progressed. Kale was asked to calibrate a holographic projector that simulated gravitational fields from distant planets. He attempted to follow Elithara's instructions precisely, which resulted in a sudden reversal of gravity on half the chamber. He tumbled into a floating shelf filled with levitating crystals, and as he bounced off a support beam, a soft asterisk plink echoed across the room. Elithara's ears twitched, and she muttered something in a language Kale did not understand. The crystals realigned themselves, as if the palace itself had a sense of humor. Kale stood, brushing glowing dust off his shoulders. "I swear," he said, "this is all part of the plan, deliberate testing. Science." Between tasks, Kale found moments to observe Elithara more closely. Her long ears flexed with emotion, subtle but expressive, and her glowing skin changed hue slightly in response to laughter, curiosity, or focus. Her eyes seemed to study him endlessly, reading his reactions, interpreting the nuances of his gestures. He realized that her perception of humans was far more nuanced than he had expected. She appreciated not just bravery or intelligence, but the small, spontaneous actions that revealed character. He wondered if he had any such moments left in him, or if he would fumble his way through the rest of the day in spectacular fashion. At one point, they were interrupted by an alien diplomat whose body resembled a floating, translucent cube filled with swirling liquid. The diplomat demanded attention to a matter of protocol that involved the distribution of ceremonial energy crystals. Kale tried to offer a suggestion, half serious, half a joke, and accidentally launched a crystal across the chamber with a misplaced gesture. The crystal bounced off a holographic display, sending the projected stars spinning wildly. The court gasped. Kale bowed deeply. "A demonstration," he said quickly, "of physics, very advanced physics." Elithara's laughter filled the room again, soft and musical, as she flicked a finger to halt the spinning projections. "You truly have a talent for creating memorable moments," she said, "even when you intend otherwise." Kale tried to appear modest, but the corners of his mouth twitched with a reluctant smile. "I've been practicing for years," he said, "mostly by accident, mostly in ways that scare cats and toddlers. But I assure you, it works in interstellar courts too." The day passed with a series of challenges that combined alien science, delicate social protocol, and Kale's own human clumsiness. He discovered that the palace itself seemed alive, responding to thought, movement, and emotion with subtle shifts in light and gravity. He managed, through a mixture of luck, quick thinking, and humor, to complete each task with only minor explosions, small puddles of glowing liquid, and a few faintly judgmental stares from hovering diplomats. By the time evening approached, the chamber outside Elithara's private quarters was bathed in the soft amber glow of twin suns setting over the crystalline lake. Kale, exhausted but somehow triumphant, allowed himself to relax slightly. "You know," he said, "I think I'm finally starting to understand how alien courts operate. Step 1, survive. Step 2, make them laugh. Step 3, maybe don't break too much." Elithara's ears twitched at the humor and her glowing eyes softened. "Perhaps you are more human than you realize," she said. "Your humor, your mistakes, your courage, they all matter. Do not forget that small acts can shape much more than you think." Kale leaned against the platform, feeling the subtle vibrations of the palace beneath him, and nodded. "I'll try to remember," he said. "Though with my track record, I might create new small acts by accident tomorrow." Elithara's laughter echoed through the hall again, warm and musical. Kale grinned, realizing that he had found a place where even a clumsy, awkward human could belong. And somewhere in the glowing, humming palace, he understood that he had begun to leave an impression, not just of survival, but of humanity itself. The court quieted as the evening light deepened, and Kale noticed for the first time that Elithara's presence had subtly shifted the entire atmosphere of the palace. It was no longer just a center of power and protocol. It was a place alive with potential, where courage, humor and kindness could ripple through civilizations, sometimes in the smallest, most unexpected ways. Cale had stumbled into this realization the hard way, but he smiled, thinking that perhaps the galaxy could use a little more clumsy, courageous humanity after all. Cale stepped into Elithara's private chamber, the soft hum of the palace vibrating through the translucent floor beneath him. The room was filled with floating flora that glowed gently, petals drifting in midair like slow-moving stars. Bioluminescent panels traced intricate constellations on the walls, each representing systems far beyond human maps. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet, a combination that made him feel dizzy and oddly at home at the same time. He straightened his posture, took a deep breath, and immediately tripped over a small levitating sphere of light. "I swear these things move when you're not looking," he muttered, catching himself with a hand on the floor that made a soft asterisk plink. Elithara watched him from across the room, her long ears angled forward with curiosity and amusement. Her skin shimmered faintly under the chamber lights, casting an ethereal glow across the floating petals. "Human," she said, her voice soft but carrying a weight that filled the room, "you have come far. Yet you still approach each task with the same, unpredictable spirit." Cale straightened, brushing imaginary dust off his tunic. "Unpredictable," he said, "is my middle name. Though technically it's Harold, but who remembers middle names these days?" Elithara's lips quirked upward, her laugh delicate, musical, filling the chamber with warmth. Cale exhaled and decided that, for once, humor could coexist with respect. She gestured for him to follow, leading him to a large crystalline console that pulsed with shifting light. "You have observed much, human," she said, "and yet now I require your judgment." Cale's eyes widened. "Judgment, me? I barely managed to keep the gravity fields from swallowing the court yesterday." Elithara's ears twitched once in amusement. Sometimes it is the smallest, most overlooked perspectives that hold the greatest weight. Cale stepped closer, peering at the display. It showed maps of sectors threatened by political unrest, areas of rebellion among colonies, and unstable energy conduits connecting distant systems. Tiny glowing symbols marked positions of fleets, stations, and planetary defenses. Cale said, "So, you want me to, reorganize your galactic empire like a very large, very glowing game of chess?" Elithara tilted her head, a slow, elegant motion, her ears swaying slightly. "In a sense. You may not see all the pieces as we do, and yet you notice things others overlook. Your humanity, your courage, your empathy, your humor, has shaped choices that even my advisors failed to anticipate." Cale's jaw dropped. "Me? Humor, you mean? Those moments when I tripped over things, knocked over crystals, and nearly exploded half your palace?" "Yes," she said softly, "exactly those moments. Each action, however small, has consequences that echo further than we imagine. And yet, you acted without expectation, without fear, sometimes with only instinct and compassion. That is why I remember you, human." Cale's mind raced. Somehow this awkward, clumsy, perpetually panicking human had been shaping galactic events all along, through small gestures and unthinking courage. So, all those accidents, puddles, broken gravity platforms, they mattered. He asked, a nervous laugh escaping him. "I guess I always wanted to leave a mark, just not this kind of mark." Elithara's ears twitched in what Cale began to recognize as her version of amusement. "You have learned far more than you realize. You see the subtleties others overlook, and your choices, even when flawed, carry influence. That is a rare and precious quality." She stepped closer, her eyes luminous in the chamber's soft glow. "Human, do you now understand what it means to act with courage and empathy, even in a place that seems impossibly alien?" Cale paused, thinking back on the days he had stumbled through protocols, navigated alien courts, and inadvertently averted disasters. He realized that he had begun to trust himself, that mistakes had become lessons, and humor a tool to bridge worlds. "I think I do," he said slowly. It's not just about surviving or following orders. It's about noticing, caring, and maybe making someone laugh in the process. Elithara inclined her head. Precisely. And you have left an impression that will outlast a single moment, a single decision. Your humanity resonates in ways even I did not anticipate. Kale's chest tightened. It was strange, humbling, and terrifying to hear such praise from someone so powerful, and yet it made sense. His journey had been one of small choices, brave gestures, and imperfect courage, all of which had ripple effects across this alien empire. She led him to a window overlooking the crystalline lake below. The twin suns were setting, painting the water in shifting shades of gold and violet. "You see, human," she said, her voice carrying the weight of galaxies. "The smallest actions echo the loudest when they are born of true intention. You acted without expectation, without calculation, and yet you shaped outcomes far greater than you imagined." Kale gazed at the lake, the floating flora, and the distant holographic constellations projected across the sky. He realized he no longer felt like an outsider, like a human flailing awkwardly in a world he didn't understand. He had grown in courage, in understanding, and in the quiet power of humor and kindness. "So even me, the guy who trips over everything, can matter?" he asked, voice soft but incredulous. Elithara's smile deepened, a gentle, knowing curve of her lips. "Yes, exactly you. Even the clumsy, even the uncertain can leave a lasting mark. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers in a hallway, or spills into a puddle, or causes someone to laugh in the midst of chaos. That is the power of humanity." Kale exhaled, a slow, steadying breath. He allowed himself a rare moment of pride, tinged with disbelief, tinged with humor. "I guess all those puddles and broken crystals weren't total disasters then." "You have learned well," Elithara said, the faint glow of her skin reflecting the sunset over the crystalline lake. "And now, human, you are ready to move forward, not as a visitor, not as a curiosity, but as one whose actions, humor, and courage shape worlds in ways both small and profound." Kale looked at her, his chest swelling with emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and a spark of wonder that he had never felt in his life. I think I understand now," he said. "Even small choices can have galactic consequences, and maybe, just maybe, laughing in the middle of chaos is a kind of superpower." Elithara's ears twitched, a subtle affirmation, and she allowed herself a quiet chuckle. "Perhaps it is human. Perhaps it is." Kale glanced around the chamber at the floating flora, the holographic stars, the faintly humming crystalline floor, and then back at the queen who had made him feel both terrified and cherished, both awkward and capable. The journey had changed him, sharpened him, and yet, in ways he would never have predicted, taught him the quiet strength of being human. "You've shown me," Elithara whispered, leaning just slightly closer, "that even the smallest actions, even those born from mistakes, laughter, or uncertainty, carry weight. That is why I remember you." Kale chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I think I'll need a manual for all this galactic heroism," he said, "but I'm glad I stumbled into it, literally and figuratively." Elithara's laughter, gentle and musical, filled the room, weaving through the floating petals and holographic constellations. "Then perhaps," she said, "human, you are exactly where you were meant to be." Kale's heart swelled with a mixture of humor, pride, and awe. He had come to this alien palace uncertain, clumsy, and wholly human, and now he realized that he mattered, not because he was flawless, but because the twin suns dipped below the crystalline horizon, casting long, warm reflections across the floating lake. Elithara's ears flicked once approvingly, and Kale allowed himself a smile that carried relief, wonder, and gratitude. He understood now. Small actions, laughter in the face of uncertainty, and a touch of human courage could echo across worlds, shaping destinies in ways both subtle and profound. And in that moment, Kale felt fully, irrevocably human, and entirely capable of leaving a mark that would resonate far beyond himself. He tripped again over a hovering petal, catching himself on the crystalline railing, and Elithara's laugh rang out once more, soft and melodic. Kale grinned, realizing that even after all he had learned, some things would never change. And perhaps that was